but it's all just thoughts, and they're basically
Yeah.
being transferred to you. Okay.
Yeah, and he's like ethereal too.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Atheist Vanguard. I am Derek Hawke.
And I'm Jim Barrows.
Shane Isgrig.
Awesome. Let's jump into today's interview.
Welcome to the Atheist Vanguard. You already know my name, but I'm going to say it for the camera. My name's Shane Isgrig. Your name again?
Chris.
All right, good to talk again. So we wanted to continue. We just had, 2 interviews, which, by the way, is awesome. It's the most anyone's ever done so far. So that's awesome.
It's all about this.
So what was there? What else did you have that you wanted to talk about?
This is
within
amazing.
category?
This is amazing. Well, I talked about dimethyltryptamine, DMT.
Right.
It's we all have it. It's in our brain. It's released. I believe it's released from your pineal gland, your third eye. I'm not sure. Pineal meaning pine cone, has layers. That's what the word derives
That's where
from.
the word comes from.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. Pineal is like a pine cone.
Yeah, so it's named after the...
It's actually almost shaped like a pine cone. A lot of
Okay.
times you see, when you go around the city or different places, you'll see a pine cone in a cup.
Okay.
You go back to ancient Sumer or Sumeria. You have one of the gods, I think they're holding pine cones. They're holding pine cones.
Okay.
So they're grasping, if you will,
Yeah.
your third eye. It's meaning they want to control your that spiritual part of who you are. And like
That's an interesting
yeah.
way. So,
Yeah.
okay, when you see a painting or...
No, they're all over.
Not just
Yeah.
paintings, but like statues, whatever.
They're
and
they're
holding-
pine cones in a cup.
Right, you're saying that
All over this
that
city, everywhere.
symbolizes
Not just city, but everywhere.
the third eye.
Yeah,
right?
that's what it meant. Yeah,
Okay, so
it goes
you're-
back to Saint Sumer.
So this is somebody trying to take control of somebody's spiritual
Yes. Yes.
outcomes? Okay.
Not necessarily take control, but to be a part of it,
be
maybe.
a part of it. So
That-
is it a-
I've grown to come to that conclusion
Okay.
throughout my experience. I've grown to come to that conclusion. Not necessarily to take control, maybe to even assist.
Okay. So it's a positive thing to see that, right?
At first, I thought it was a negative thing. So
I
right
can
now,
see how it might come off that way.
right now, I'm definitely on the side of positive.
Okay,
On
that's
that.
good.
So with that being said, I'm gonna go on to the next what I was talking about. My grandfather, beautiful man. His last name is Gross, and he was a Pentecostal pastor. And my whole, my mom, all of her siblings were raised up in that belief system, and that idea. And my mom was a little out there a little bit, but she the story is she got raped by her uncle.
Sorry to hear.
And he blew his head off. So I mean, it's I had to carry. I believe in like these ideas of curses and stuff being passed over. It's more like energy. It's not really curses. It's more like energy being passed over. So I had to deal with that energy. Wasn't cool. Things I had to go through to deal with that. Anyhow, long story short, my grandfather was on his deathbed, and he literally was in a hospital, and we all knew it. Beautiful man, Pentecostal pastor, and he visited me. And this is a DMT situation because he was in like a comatose type state, like I was talking about. When you get into that comatose type state, DMT is released right before you die sometimes. And he came to me. Well, what happened is my wife, I felt really heavy, like almost like I had to kneel, or bow, really heavy. And so he came to me, and he, what happened is I felt heavy first, and then my ex-wife, Tiffany, she came in the room, and she wanted to be there with me, and I in retrospect, I didn't know why, but I'm kind of like thinking about it. And then I told her to leave because I wanted to be alone. And she started crying and walked out the room. I think I know why now. She wanted to be a part of it. But it was my grandfather, So I felt heavy, man. I felt real heavy because I knew he was getting ready to die, and it was like days. It wasn't like like he just died, and it was just like days. And he came to me. I sat on the edge of the bed. I literally moved from the middle of the bed, sat on the edge of the bed, and just crying, bawling, just crying, dude. And he came to me in front of me. He was in his heavenly body, is what I call it, because he didn't look wrinkled in his face. He looked young. He looked like he had many lives. Like, how you have, like they say that people have past lives and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. He looked like he had many lives.
Okay.
But I could tell it was him, and he never spoke. It was all with thoughts. It's only thoughts, back and forth. And he didn't like the fact that I was crying, basically, but he didn't have a lot of time. He kept relaying this with emotions and thoughts, back and forth. That there wasn't. He wanted to talk to everybody. He wanted to talk to his whole family. He wanted to, I don't know, what you call it, like when you die, you want to mend the wounds, or like talk to your members of your family.
I can't think of the word.
You know what I'm talking
what
about?
You're talking about. Not necessarily. I mean, bridge gaps could be a good term. But
yeah.
There's a specific term
Yeah,
you use, and I can't
yeah,
think of it either.
yeah.
But I know what you're looking for.
Add it in if you want.
All right, I'll add it in the round table.
If you can find it. But yeah, that's it. He wanted to wrap up his. He wanted to touch his family, and he gave me a thought that I didn't even have. If I had it, I forgot it. I literally forgot it. And what it was me on his lap, or on his knee, not on his lap, nothing weird. Grandfather never did anything to me, ever. Beautiful man. Very respectful pastor, dude. Great. He showed me his thought from his mind.
Okay, so he was able to like transfer
Project,
a thought to you,
yes.
like, show you
Yes.
the image, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. First off, he didn't want me crying. It's not something that he liked. It's not that he disliked it. It was just like, there's no reason to cry, because I was crying because he's dying. He's dying. He's gone, and he's gonna be gone. So he didn't want me to do that, because it was more like he knew he was going to a better place or something like that. I know it kind of sounds.
Yeah, it sounds, if I'm not mistaken, like he basically wanted to let you know, I'm okay, don't feel so bad, kind of thing.
Yes,
right?
yes, but it's all with
And-
thoughts, man. He never
right.
moved his mouth.
Never
I could
moved
see
his
him.
mouth. So you don't hear audibly, you see
It's
something.
all thoughts, man.
But it's all just thoughts, and they're basically
Yeah.
being transferred to you.
Yeah, and he was like ethereal too, like see-through kind of.
Okay.
It's amazing, dude. And the emotion was amazing. I couldn't help but cry though. I love him.
Understandable.
Anyhow, long story short, he showed me a thought that was me sitting on his knee as a child, looking back up at him in his face with unconditional love, as a child does.
Okay.
And that's what he was trying to relay to me. And that's what it's about.
I see that. Okay. That makes sense. All right. Well.
Yeah, dude, it was amazing. And so I kept that thought, and I hold that. I don't really talk about this very much, so it's actually
I
really.
appreciate you opening about something so personal.
Yeah, yeah. Those are the two DMT experiences I've had. One with the demon, one with my grandfather.
Do you think that if DMT hadn't been released or whatever in your brain,
I couldn't have had that.
you
No,
wouldn't have had the experience? Okay.
Honestly.
It's an interesting thought.
honestly, I honestly think that it's called the God particle.
Right.
You
so
know.
these things already exist. This just helped you be
Right.
able to see them. Right?
I smoked a
Interpret
little
them.
weed before. I think
Okay.
that had something to do with it.
Okay.
But he was in a hurry. He was trying to talk to all of his his whole family.
Yeah.
And some of them he couldn't reach, but he reached me.
Well,
I don't know if that says I'm special or not, but it's a
maybe
beautiful
there's
thing.
reason for it, right?
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, thanks
Hey, man.
again.
I appreciate you letting me talk to you, bro.
Well. Shane, start us out here. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, my most important thought to summarize this whole thing is that it's kind of about the last question when I asked him, do you think that if DMT wasn't being released in your brain, that you would have been having this experience. And he flat out just says, there's no way I could have had that experience without the DMT being released.
Can you elaborate? I mean, is the DMT something that he's taking, or is he talking about the natural presence of what you normally have?
That's what's tricky about DMT. So DMT is a chemical that already exists in, plants and mammals. It exists in your brain already, in your cerebral spinal fluid. And it can be activated by, we're not going to get into how you activate it because I don't advocate for it or condemn it. I just, I don't have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
That I'm going to voice here. So the point is, though, he wasn't talking about actually doing a drug DMT. He was talking about like the natural release of DMT. That's why he starts talking about being in a comatose type state.
There seems to be a really strong correlation between, I'd say, spirituality and the effects of DMT. Is that kind of what his religion is based upon, or his beliefs?
Well, DMT is referred to as the spirit molecule.
Not the guard particle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, similar.
Yeah,
I'm sure that's what he was thinking, but kind of the same thing. So I think
the God particle is the Higgs boson.
Yeah.
Right. So with DMT, what a lot of people believe about it is that the things that they see when the DMT is being released is real. They just think that DMT is kind of like this missing, like you're required to take it to see it, right?
Yeah.
And part of what confirms that to people is the fact that a lot of people experience the same things. Like they talk about something called DMT elves, for example.
Isn't it the DMT like a conduit into another altered reality type thing, or even?
Yeah.
So you're actually physically in another reality.
That kind of kind of begs the question of how does something physical in this world, whether it's a chemical or a physical door or whatever you want to call it, transfer you to another world? What is that process?
Yeah.
And what is being transferred? Because your physical body is there. It can be observed. It can be documented that you don't go nowhere. This man was in a coma, which I'm not sure how his DMT affected the other guy's DMT, but that's an old...
That's actually a point that I'm glad you brought up.
Yeah.
Because when he talks about his grandpa being in a comatose type state, that makes sense to say that his grandpa would have the DMT experience for that reason. But
he was asleep, so...
Right, but if it was...
And don't forget the weed.
Well, sure. But he ends up saying he was asleep when he experienced this, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's how he was able to get it. I've heard that DMT is what's responsible for causing dreams.
Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact, so I encourage.
But again, if there is something to this, then we should be able to discover the mechanism by which it happens.
Right.
Because we have this molecule, and I would assume we can do some sort of tests on it or something. If we can't today, then maybe for some tomorrow we could. But that's the question: is what is the mechanism by which this happens?
Yeah.
And if it's something that is really happening, we should be able to detect it somehow.
Right. Would it also be reasonable to assume that if we're taking the same chemical, the DMT, and it takes me to one place, but takes you to some place totally different, and takes you to some place totally different, wouldn't it be a logical conclusion to say that this is just something that fabricated in our mind?
Totally, but that's kind of why I was saying like a lot of people describe a similar experience, and that's what convinces people that
do they describe a similar experience across cultures or just within a culture?
I've heard across cultures.
Okay, because not every culture has the concept of elves. So how would
so DMT elves is a label that we've kind of put on these things that people see. They're actually, a lot of people describe them as alien entities.
Yeah.
So they give them similar descriptions. It's just elves is one label that
shadow people.
So have they actually done a test where they have taken somebody who doesn't know anything about the DMT experience and then had them describe it and come up with the exact same thing?
I believe so.
Because one of the things that we've noticed is like with the UFOs, up until people started being able to publish images, you had wildly different views of what aliens look like.
That's a pretty good point.
Once we started having pictures published, all the aliens started to look alike.
You remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? After that movie came out, that's what the aliens started looking like.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of, again, starts asking these questions of what and how, and how does, because ideas are contagious, they promulgate.
Well,
Right.
aren't there things that the brain that's how we associate? We associate black with negative. We associate white with positive.
No, actually, in Chinese and Japanese cultures, it's the exact opposite.
Okay. Well, what about facial expressions? And we all make this facial movement of a smile, and it means
There
happiness.
are micro expressions that appear to be cross-cultural.
Yeah. So couldn't it be that there's in certain states we would have similar reactions that we would interpret in similar ways?
That would be the question to answer, right?
There's a similar, in most states, legal psychedelic that can be used that people have described seeing this like black face, kind of like a woman's face right in front of them, pulling on them. And a lot of people have described the same experience and then later talked about it.
But
a friend of mine told me about that experience, and later we read about that other people had experienced it.
Yeah.
So really there's probably some explanation as to why people are seeing very similar things.
Well, we've talked.
But like you were getting into, I don't think that explanation is that what they're seeing is real.
Yeah. Well, we talked about sleep paralysis, where there's a lot of similarities. Like we had similar experiences with the little jumping men on our chests.
Right.
There's things.
I thought mine was a cat. You thought yours was a
little gate demon.
Yeah.
But still, similar situations, know. And so you have across the board where you have a phenomena that we are interpreting.
You
similar.
interpret similar things, and because we have similar backgrounds, we're all from the same culture.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have the same reference points, and so we're going to tend to use those reference points to come back to.
Right.
Which is why I think it's important to isolate the idea contagion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you have someone who's never been exposed to these ideas, and then from a different culture with different reference points.
Right.
And then if they come up with the same idea and the same descriptions, then you can kind of go, well, there may be something here.
Right.
So I think what we've kind of established over the past few minutes is we're not really sure why people are seeing the same things. We don't know if it has to do with, different cultures, whatever. But I guess the important point is that even if I could grant you that like everybody taking a psychedelic is seeing the same thing, that doesn't mean that thing is real, right? Like
correct.
If I take acid and then Derek takes acid and then Derek and I agree that chair is moving in the same way, that doesn't mean that chair is really doing it and you just need to be on acid to see it.
Mm-hmm.
The more probable explanation is the visual effect is being caused in a similar way.
When my dad was in the Air Force and younger, he would sit alert with his crew. And so his entire crew in basically one room. And he described this one time waking up and having to go to the bathroom and realizing that his crewmates were all talking. They were all flying the exact same mission. They were doing their jobs in their sleep together.
Oh, yeah?
Dead asleep. He says it's the weirdest thing in the world.
Were they interacting with each other?
Yeah, they were completely interacting with each other. Callbacks, the whole 9 yards. They were flying an airplane. They were flying a B-52 on the last practice mission they did.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I talk in my sleep, but it's usually not something where like I'll respond to what you said.
Yeah, they were responding. He described it as responding back and forth. We can't actually know, but the level of training that they were going through at the time was such that you could fake the responses just by timing them correctly.
Right.
Because, if he says something and he's expecting a response within a second or two, and then he goes on to the next thing he's supposed to be doing, you could do that.
That's slightly eerie.
He said it was pretty freaky to realize that they were flying an airplane.
Yeah.
And then when I was a lifeguard at Dyess Air Force Base, they were bedding down the B-1, and we were asked to make sure that the young pilots did not go to sleep in the sun for that exact same reason, because they'd be flying the B-1. It was again a little strange, a little weird, but people, sleep is kind of complicated.
Yeah. So let's talk about the pineal gland. I guess the third eye.
Boy.
Yeah.
So-
I label this as 2 pine cones in a cup.
Yeah.
Well, that's supposed to kind of be a metaphor, but what that metaphor stems from is the pineal gland is shaped like a pine cone.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's why they named it that. Wouldn't be surprised if that's why.
Yeah.
But I think this is something where people go, look, there's something in our brain that happens to have the same shape as something else in nature, and they see correlation and, of course, assume the correlation.
And then
it's causation.
So why do they associate it with the third eye?
Well, so that's really the question, because if you go back to
Yeah.
Sumerian times, I will buy that they knew there was a structure in the brain that looked like a pine cone. I will buy that, because if you cut the brain open carefully enough,
Yeah.
you can get to the different structures and see them and describe them. Then the question becomes, how do you then know what the chemistry is of the pineal gland? Because they didn't have chemistry sets as far as I knew. They didn't have a good understanding of how chemicals worked and how they affected in the brain like we do today. As far as I've been able to tell, they don't. So how do they know this? How do they know that the pineal gland has some photoreceptors on it? How do they know all this stuff about the pineal gland? And I think the answer is they didn't. That we're after the fact looking at these ancient people and seeing gods with pine cones. Why isn't a pine cone a symbol of fertility? It's a bunch of seeds. They knew that too. So why isn't it a symbol of bounty
Right. How do we arrive at the conclusion that the pine cone in a cup was a metaphor
for a pineal gland?
Yeah, that's a pretty good
Something which would be very difficult for ancient peoples to figure out.
It would be easier for me to like kind of accept if it was like a mushroom, because I would go, okay, people could figure out that
Mushrooms cause hallucinations.
right.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like on ancient Egyptian pyramids. Sometimes there are like hieroglyphs or whatever where there's a brain, and inside the brain there's a mushroom, and you're like, that makes you wonder if they were, using psychedelics.
And it makes sense because it's an easy association you can make.
Yeah.
If I eat this, I know this is going to happen.
Right. I mean,
And
to me,
some cool shit's going to happen.
so it's kind of a similar thought process. To me, the
Yeah.
most likely explanation of why you see hieroglyphs with a mushroom in a brain, it has, it could have something to do with the fact that they were hallucinating. But I don't know that. And I think there's a similar thought process in somebody going, okay, there's a pineal gland, there's a pine cone. But it's kind of weird, though, a pine cone in a cup.
Right.
What is the cup a metaphor for?
I don't know.
I can't come up with that. And then me having a pine cone in a cup is a metaphor for me wanting to be a part of your spirituality.
Now, is that symbol as prominent as he makes it to believe? I personally have never heard of this.
You do a quick Google search for images of Sumerian gods.
But he made it sound like it was something like everywhere.
I've never heard of it until this conversation, but he didn't make it up, because if you research it,
Oh yeah, no,
it's not his own idea, like originals.
I don't think it's as prominent as he gives it credit for.
Yeah.
And like I said, I couldn't find too much about whether or not some of the gods that are portrayed with them were fertility gods or gods of harvest or.
Right. Well, then he talks. So he experiences an encounter with his grandpa, and in his experience, his grandpa he said he was ageless, but he knew it was him, right?
Right.
But he
Many
also
lives.
Yeah. So he said he was ageless, but he also said he looked like he had lived many lives.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know what that looks like.
Me too. It's probably something where it's like, you have to experience it to understand it.
Yeah.
This guy, I mean, he had a lot of stories to tell. It's unfortunate that it was so disjointed. It was really hard to keep. You did a really good job of keeping him on target.
Yeah. Well,
but
it's kind of hard because he believes that this was an encounter where he was actually with his grandpa, right?
Yeah.
And
I believe the word that he was looking for, at least in my opinion, was closure. He was looking for.
yes, when he talks about like mending wounds or whatever, he's probably talking about getting closure. So he believes that his grandpa came to him to get closure after he was in a comatose type state, right? So I don't know how much I want to tell him that last conversation where he got closure wasn't a real one, but if you're somebody that values truth, you should, which everybody should. I think it's important to establish that conversation probably wasn't you and him, his actual consciousness being a part of you.
Doesn't it make? I mean, it makes more sense that your grandfather is on his deathbed. He's about to die. You go to sleep. That's on your mind.
Yes,
and that's what you're going to dream about.
Right.
Yeah. The last thing that you and especially for something that's having such a big impact on you, I think you're going to dream about that. And if you're someone who lucid dreams a lot, then that's what your brain's going to interpret it as something.
Right.
I mean, that occurrence, I mean, for me, that's one of the main reasons why religion is such a prominent part of people's lives, is to help you cope with that final question, what happens to us when we die? And not only that, not only for ourselves, but mostly for our loved ones, because I know when I've experienced death in my family or death of something close, whether it be a pet or not, part of my anguish is the loss of this person or this thing that I loved with all my heart and I believe deserves an eternity of paradise.
And then your desire to see them again.
Exactly, yeah. And not only that, but the desire that they're enjoying this existence that they deserve, something that gave me so much love and so much joy, that they're gone, but they're in a better place. I understand the appeal of that. I understand, the desire for that. And truth is not always the most comfortable thing.
Right. And understand there are going to be some people who think that we are just assholes because we don't encourage believing in something that isn't true, even if the belief is comforting.
Yeah.
To me, I just value truth.
Right.
If a good example is if a family member of mine is dying, I want to know about it. Or even worse, if they're dead.
Right.
Don't tell me that person is still alive, or be reluctant to tell me that person is dying because, okay, well, you'll be happy if you think that person's cancer went away. You'll be happy to think that person's still alive. I mean, no, what's more important is that I am aware of the reality of that person's situation.
Yeah. Well, death rituals are one of the things that are universal to almost all cultures, along with marriage. But, and even the Stoics who, you can make an argument the Stoics had a religion or believed in supernatural, but I think there's a stronger case to be made that they didn't really believe in that. But a lot of their writings deal with how do you deal with death, the death of loved ones, the death of yourself, the death of enemies. How do you deal with this? And a lot of the writings are about that because it is kind of a big, scary thing of, when I die, what happens to my family? It's why we get life insurance, right? And, if I die, what happens to my cat and my dog?
Right.
The life insurance is more about what happens to me after they're gone.
Yeah, but yes, I misspoke. Yeah, more what happens. So it's some big, scary stuff, especially in the modern world.
Well, you think of Christianity, and we automatically assume that the biggest adversary within that religion is Satan, and it's not. It's death. You hear a lot of Christians, refer to, Jesus conquering death, or use the term that Jesus, Christianity is the only religion with an empty tomb.
Right.
Where death is, then that's the ultimate carrot, is this existence beyond death with a perfect body, living a perfect existence, worshiping this God for all eternity and forever bliss. I mean, it's the ultimate.
I find the fact that life is finite to be what gives it value. I've made this metaphor before, but we have viewers that are new, so I'll make it again. And it's kind of like, if you have, say, $1 million, that's enough to be grateful for. If you think you have $10 billion, finding out you have $1 million is going to devastate you. Now imagine if you thought you had an infinite amount of money. Now, same concept with time, that you're going to be alive. If you think you're going to live forever, it will devastate you to find out that you don't live forever.
Yeah, because fear of loss is a thing.
Personally, I don't want to exist forever. That doesn't mean that I want to die. It just means I don't want to exist forever. And when I think about this...
A part of me does.
Okay. So there's goodbye, Grampa. Most people over the age of 15 have experienced losing a grandparent, right?
Right.
Personally, I've lost my grandpa, and I would say that in a sense, it gives me comfort that he doesn't exist anymore because he doesn't want to exist forever. Knowing the guy, he didn't want to be existing forever. And now, once he was over 93, honestly, a little before that, probably 90, he was kind of like, I've lived a happy life. I'm good. He was ready to go after that. And he was always telling me, once you're about 85, 90, you have so much past, you've had so much of an experience to be grateful for. You're not really bothered with the fact that you're not going to exist forever.
Yeah.
So
You're talking about fear and the power of fear.
Yeah.
Vsauce did a really good episode on what really makes us afraid. And really, really good episode. Highly recommend you go watch it. But it's not what everybody thinks. Because when you remove, I forget which gland it is that controls fear, but when you have someone who has removed that, all the things in horror movies that make us afraid and all the rest of that go away pretty quickly. And what you're left with is the primal fear of not being able to breathe. Excuse me. And that is the one thing that gets past that gland.
okay.
So fear and fear of dying is very powerful.
Right.
Yeah, and very primal. I mean, to have any kind of fear.
Yeah.
I mean, our fear of death is something that keeps us alive. I mean,
Exactly, yeah.
the fact
Yeah.
that whenever you're near, you're on a high structure, if you're looking down, I mean, you have this natural fear of heights. Everybody, some people, when they say they have a fear of heights, what they really mean is they have it more so than normal, right?
Right. I'm that way. Yeah.
Right. So, but I mean, if you're just on a high up structure looking down, you will naturally feel afraid of that edge.
Yeah.
And
See, I think this is really important conversation because I recently had the death of my grandmother, which really devastated me, and
Sorry to
it
hear
was
that.
it was from pancreatic cancer. So she was diagnosed in August and was dead 4 months later. So not only did she not have time to really prepare herself for that, we didn't either, and she didn't. She was not ready to go. And as an atheist, and this is before I was involved in the ACA. I found the support within the atheist community kind of lacking because it was a very kind of cold type of, when you die, that's it, it's over. And there was really no sympathy and empathy that was expressed. It was more of this pure logic, and that was really difficult to help me with my grieving and mourning process. Also, having coming from a religious family, I had my family members who were supporting each other and comforting each other and taking comfort in the fact that they believed that they would see her again. And I was actually excluded from that mourning process.
yeah,
and
that's a difficult part of any mourning process in my
And I
family.
was also targeted because they knew that I didn't believe in heaven.
Are you also the only atheist in your family?
Oh, yeah.
I'm the only out atheist on my mom's side of the family. I won't,
Right.
Yeah.
But they were offended by the thought that I didn't believe in
right,
heaven.
and you're
Therefore,
dealing
my
with
grandmother
something
was in heaven.
difficult.
Well,
That's a difficult thought for you, and they're offended by you having this hard time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
They were
that's
also
a very
offended-
difficult thing to deal with.
They were also very offended that I was trying to explore ways to reconcile this thought. I was exploring how do I come to terms with my grandmother's not in heaven, and I wanted to believe. I was actually having what would, for lack of better words, a crisis of faith. Faith was creeping back in because I wanted to believe so hard again that this wonderful woman was.
It wasn't the end.
It wasn't the end. Yeah.
You know what? This
Right.
is something that I think a lot of atheists who have dealt with the mourning process can relate to, and I'm glad that you brought it
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Because
'Cause one
that's
of-
something that is not a rare.
Atheist communities are relatively new, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
And one of the things that we don't have are the platitudes that Christians do. I'm sure she's in a better place, and all those platitudes they use to indicate that they're sympathizing, to indicate that they share your emotion, and that things are okay. We don't really have those types of things within our communities yet.
Yeah, the cold truth, although is the truth, is hard to hear sometimes.
We're emotional beings, and we deal with emotion, and that's just the fact. And we have to find ways to help people grieve and through the process.
Yeah,
And because I don't think anybody was actually cold; they just didn't know what to say or do because we don't have those platitudes.
yeah. Absolutely,
Right.
it's very similar to how atheists suffer during the holidays, where you have these religious theme, celebrations, and you can feel excluded, or even taunted because they know that you don't believe that. I've actually experienced that as well. I was specifically told to do grace for Thanksgiving, knowing that I don't believe in that, and so it was kind of like a tease and taunt.
Wait, they told you to not be present for that?
They actually specified that I would do grace for the dinner.
Oh yeah. Okay. See, that's a frustrating thing for me.
Yeah.
On November is we're here, it's always difficult for me because I don't ask that they don't pray. I just don't want to be a part of it.
Correct.
And
Right.
I have always kind of compromised with just like holding hands with everyone. But then I kind of think like, from this perspective of a believer, do you want a non-believer involved in that prayer?
Yep.
Like, isn't my godlessness tainting your prayer or something? Like,
Well, one of the things
but-
I think that to kind of look at it too, another way to look at it is you're not so much praying as you're reminding people of why you're there. And so that ceremony can be very important. Ceremonies we know are important to human beings.
yeah.
And so it's a ceremony of a reminder of why we're there. What are we giving thanks for? And it
Right.
doesn't have to be religious.
Right.
Even though it is Thanksgiving and it's supposed to be, even though it's Christmas.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be religious. I think it's a good idea to at least once a year think about somebody else.
Right.
Christmas forces
Absolutely.
us to do that.
Well, we can take another example. During my grandmother's funeral, it was a Catholic funeral, and we were asked to bow our heads in prayer. I didn't, and I noticed a number of family members looking up and giving me kind of a dirty look, and I interpreted it as that they were offended because I was not engaging in prayer for their mother, their sister.
And that's difficult because you said this was at the funeral, right?
This was at the funeral. Yes, I
So-
was a pallbearer. Yep.
During your mourning process is no time to pretend anything. Like, this is no time for anyone to expect me to partake in a prayer that I don't believe in.
Right.
There's this is the... Like,
There was a lot of ugliness that emerged through this death. A lot of, not only that, but, fights over the will and everything. It was just, of course, at that point when it became money, God was thrown out the window and it all just became about the money.
Right. Yeah. And that, when emotions are running high, and as it would be for the death of a loved one, well, that means all the emotions are running high. Anger, and everyone is quicker to judge and quicker to be human. And so I think you can make a case that, not bowing your head in that case wasn't showing respect for those who do believe and their beliefs. But so many times, Christians don't show any respect to atheists and our own beliefs that I'm not, if you want respect, you've got to give respect.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want me to respect your beliefs, then you should show mine some respect as well. And
Yeah.
that
Right.
never happens. And I'm not sure that makes any logical sense, but it emotionally feels
It
pretty
does. I
satisfying.
mean, you're taking the extra mile to go and think about why that might be offensive, right? You're able to think about what their perspective even is. A lot of the time, I feel like theists, or at least religious people, Catholics for sure, do not take the time to think about, what's your thought process? Like I was kind of saying how I'm mourning. I don't feel like pretending I believe in something. I don't feel like partaking in a prayer to a religion that I don't believe in. Like, this is not the time for you to have me pretend because I'm being authentic right now.
Yeah.
And if I really think, and this is something you should encourage in everyone, just empathy.
Yeah.
Just what are the other people thinking?
I think what was really scary for me was that it got so bad that I was actually considering, you can't make yourself believe a lie. And I was considering that. It was like, well, if I just believe, I could believe that she's this and this is happening. I even, there was a point where I was almost praying. It was just because I was not mourning. I didn't know how to mourn. I didn't know how to grieve. And when you don't know how to grieve and mourn, you get stuck in this whirlpool of this just cyclic, downward spiral. And it's very dangerous. And I was very fortunate. And not all people are as fortunate as I was, but I lived down the street from the ACA.
Yeah.
And I actually met people, at first I was interacting with people over the Facebook page. And that's kind of where you get the cold response. And again, it's not anybody's fault there because, you just can't convey these type of emotions.
Thank you for mentioning the Facebook page. Anyone who doesn't have a local atheist community when you're mourning in your process, go to the Atheist Community of Austin's Facebook page.
We also have Grieving Beyond Non-Belief.
Okay. I actually didn't even know about that.
That's fantastic. It's a closed group, and you can talk about all your feelings as people who don't believe, and you have wonderful people that are going through the same thing you are or have gone through it.
Right.
And it's just an absolute wonderful organization that's on Facebook.
I did totally interrupt you though, so I'm
No,
sorry.
it's
What were you-
okay.
Okay.
But I did come here and I met people that really helped me understand and also acknowledge, yes, these are legitimate feelings. These are legitimate, just issues and emotions, and it's okay to feel that way. And I didn't only just get the I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm also got a permission to feel the way I do.
It's okay to not feel okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's an important distinction. It's one that the Stoics made quite a bit. Is it's okay to feel. It's not okay to act on the feeling in many cases, but it is okay to feel.
Yeah, I have that with jealousy. Like you could be jealous, and that's totally fine. Human beings all have that.
Right.
But if you know that you're jealous and that that's not rational, then do not act out of your jealousy.
Correct.
Right. Or fear.
Fear?
Fear is a big one to not act out of.
Anger.
Anger,
I mean,
hatred. Yeah, the negative emotions are the
Let-
worst.
yeah.
That leads to the dark side.
Well, the negative emotions especially. Acting out of love, I don't think you can go too wrong if you're actually acting out of love for
Unless
somebody
you're a
else.
stalker.
Well, that's not really love.
I don't know about love, but I mean, I guess if you love someone and you just buy them presents that you can't afford, and they're like, "We can't afford this." I mean,
Well, at that point,
let's just add logic to any thought process. Let's not go off of emotions, even if they're positive.
But I don't know that at that point it's love and more obsession and other things.
Okay.
I would say, but bringing joy and happiness to yourself and others is always a good thing.
Yeah.
But and if you're putting yourself into debt, to use your example, you're no longer bringing joy and happiness to yourself.
All right.
All righty. Is there anything else that we need to cover before we
I
close it
think
out?
we've covered this interview. You know what? I do want to just say thank you for giving us the story that you gave in the interview, because I know that wasn't an easy thing to open up for. So wanted to say thanks if he's watching.
Yeah, and thank you for an awesome interview.
Yeah.
You're welcome, man. Thank you guys.
Yeah. Before we leave, I want to ask you a question. How are you guys doing? Any
Not so bad.
Not so bad. Some issues. We normally close out the show with a little thought experiment. A lot of our Christian friends will tell us that if they're having experience problems, that they can open it up to the Bible, and we'll have the answers magically appear in front of them, just by coincidence. It'll tell them exactly what they need to hear, or just to lift them up from this despair. So we're going to try to replicate that. I have a Bible here. I'm going to open it up to a random verse, but first I want to find out if you guys have any issues that we can probably put this to.
For me, I've been doing this show for like half a year now, and still every
Time
single
flies.
time that I record, I can't get these damn earplugs in. They got to go over your ear and then up at an angle. I always have to have our producer help me put them in.
We actually should do an entire show just of Shane trying to put these plugs in.
This guy's new and he does it like immediately. I cannot get my earplugs in.
I think you have malformed ear holes.
No, it's just that I'm stupid. But
It's just I said, you're not stupid either.
Can Jesus reform your ear holes?
I don't know.
Can he regrow a limb from a pair of...
I don't have enough information to answer that.
Okay.
So
All right. What you got?
Yeah, so I don't think that the people who made these glasses got the distance quite right.
Okay, so you got malformed eyes.
Well, yeah, because I need glasses, right? Yeah, which means that I'm not going to the kingdom of heaven, by the way, even if I did believe. So I got to take them back in and have them either check to make sure the prescription was done right on these, or get a new prescription.
All right.
Because I can't see distance. So if you could fix my eyes, that would be great.
all right.
All right. I'm having issues with patience.
Patience.
People are getting on my last damn nerve.
Okay.
Well, some of us do that intentionally because it's so much fun.
Apparently.
Just so
Present
the
company
audience
excluded.
knows,
Present company excluded.
that's being passive aggressive toward me. I'm the one that's on his nerves.
No, actually no.
No,
You're not the only one.
You're not the only one. You're up there though.
Yeah.
I'm up there. Okay, there we go. There's
All
some
right.
honesty.
I'm going to go to Luke chapter 10, verse 22. All things are delivered to me of my Father, and no man knoweth who the Son is, but the Father who the Father is, but the Son to whom the Son will be revealed to.
What kind of word salad was that?
That was some words.
Okay, I'm going to read
so
it.
first of all,
I'm going to read it slowly.
How is it that the Father is the only one who knows the Son is, considering that the Father did not bear the child?
and the son and the father were the same person.
So let me read again. All things are delivered to me of my Father, and no man knoweth who the Son is, but the Father, who the Father is, but the Son, to who he, the Father's Son, will be revealed.
That didn't help. Reading it slower does not help. It just makes it more painful.
All things are delivered to me of my Father, and no man knoweth who the Son is, but the Father,
So,
and who the Son is, but the Son, and he to whom the Son will reveal him.
Okay, so how about this? What's been delivered to me are these earplugs that I don't know how to figure out. If this verse is true, God should help me figure out how to get these things in right the first time, every time.
Yeah,
That's-
I'm
that's
still having
the
trouble
be-
with biology, basic biology here.
It's the best I can come up with.
Okay,
I have trouble with the biology.
Actually, I should read a little bit further for you. And he turned him unto his disciples and said privately, "Blessed are the eyes which see things that ye see."
Which see things that you see.
Well, so
Or
now
the
most of the
sentence.
library is gone. So now it's back. Now they're gone. So what does he mean?
And for I tell you that many prophets and kings have desired to see those things which ye see and have
Let's
seen them.
back up to the biology
hear
portion,
them
because
which ye
the
hear.
biology on this one is all kinds of messed up, right? Because how is it that the Father knows who their Son is?
Because the baby mama.
Right. Only the baby mama knows who she gave birth to and
Are
who
you
fathered the
applying
child.
logic?
That's
to
the baby daddy.
Yeah. Yes, I'm applying logic to the Bible, and it'll probably make my head explode.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I don't think you're supposed to apply logic to it.
Well,
But
All I can say is that this was a test. This verse was a test of my patience, and I failed.
yeah, pretty much.
okay. Was it
Word
easy?
salad is never.
Word salad, and always on Atheist Vanguard. Thank you guys for joining us. Please like and subscribe. Please join the comments and the interaction down below. We love hearing from you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Later.
Bye-bye.